wonderful to have everybody here, and I'm really excited about today's webinar. So our first speaker is Duncan Attwood, and it's a great pleasure to introduce him. I met Duncan about a year and a little bit ago, and he's one of these people you just warm to straight away. But if you are a member at Duncan's studio, you'll know what I mean by that. And the thing about Duncan is he really does genuinely care about making a difference, and his passion and enthusiasm, I think of him like Tigger. He goes out of his way to enthuse about everything he does. So it's just as well that he really likes Fit 20, because we've got, you couldn't get somebody more enthusiastic. And he makes a difference. He really makes a difference, and that's really what we're about. So without any further ado, I'll turn it over to Duncan. We're really excited and lucky to have you involved as a Fit 20 franchisee, and he goes out of his way to help and support everyone and anyone, whether they're in his area or not. So over to you, Duncan.
Thank you, Neil, for the welcome. That's great. Well, good to meet you all. I'm going to start by, I'm going to see if I can share my screen. Hopefully I can. I thought I'd start by telling you a little bit about me, where I've come from, my background. And I'll start off by saying that when I was a child, actually, I was overweight and had a number of health conditions, including, and I was always under the impression if you wanted to help people, the best way of doing it was through medicine, because that's what doctors did with me. So that's originally what I thought I wanted to do, is to go down the road of being a doctor and get into medicine to help people get better. But thankfully, I, through scouting, found kayaking and got pretty good at it, and got to the point where I was being coached by Olympic coaches. And as you can imagine, going through that, my physique massively changed. So I started to get a lot stronger, a lot leaner, and the health conditions I had went away. So I no longer needed an inhaler, no longer had asthma issues, and other medical conditions were all sorted by it. And I realized that was a far, far better and more effective way of improving your health and obviously fitness at the same time. So I then went down the route of studying it, and went to university, got my first degree, and I've got a master's as well. And then went into the fitness industry. And through all this, you can see I've then, my family's in the middle, you can probably see on the screen there, and I do all this for them and keep myself fit and healthy. Kayaking, you can see what I've done around the outside. So I do a lot of whitewater kayaking. I've also done expedition out in Alaska. I like mountain biking and skiing and snowboarding, all that as well. But the thing I find now is that it's having the time to do those is where I suppose, struggled to keep it up. And as I got older, although I went through a phase of, being very fit, it went, the phrase use it or lose it. And unfortunately, I lost it a bit. And I was using these activities when I could do it to try and get my fitness up. But the thing I find now with training in the way we do with Fit 20 is I'm getting all the exercise, and this type of thing I do just for fun. When I do it with the family, just for fun. But yeah, went into the fitness industry and spent 20 years in the fitness industry with big health and fitness clubs, big operators like David Lloyd and Bannatynes and people like that. And I found over that time that, unfortunately, a lot of people do not train effectively. And I've seen a lot of people come into the gyms and they may be coming 3 times a week, but they're not changing. Their bodies aren't getting any better. And often it's lack of knowledge and lack of understanding of how to train effectively. And this is where Fit 20 certainly seems to change that for us. And it's about having perfect training. So on the next screen, I can explain how all this works. Hopefully it moves. Oh dear. Oh. Right, this isn't working. Give me a second, guys. I have to do it again. I don't know why that's not worked.
So exactly what we were saying at the beginning, is that there's always something that comes up to challenge, and it always gets sorted.
There is, isn't there?
There we go.
I'm hoping you can see the next slide in a second. There we go. Okay, not maybe working quite as well, but at least you can see the type of thing I'm talking about. So obviously, we're going to be talking about the importance of rest and today in relation to exercise and training, but you've got to train first to be able to get that rest and understand the importance of both. So with Fit 20, just to explain how we do it, if you look at this graph we've got here, you come in at point 8 when you come into the studio, and with every exercise training that you do, regardless of whether it's Fit 20 or anything else you choose to do, When you do your training, it weakens you off. And that is a stimulus that tells our body to get stronger. And obviously, the more effectively you can do that, the better the results. And actually, then often the more rest you need in between. So you come in at point A, with Fit 20, we weaken you off in a session. And you can see over the next few days, your body is getting stronger again. But it super compensates. So get stronger up to point C, but get stronger above that because we've taken you to the point with Fit 20, it's having the best results. And essentially, we go for muscular failure. And the way I try and describe that to people, it's like if you go back to caveman days, if you were to push yourself to muscular failure, the chances are that would have resulted in death because there's no logical reason why you'd ever push yourself that hard. But your body responds very strongly to that stimulus if it does survive and says, well, I've got to get stronger to make sure that that thing can't happen to me again and I'm protected. So that's why our body super compensates. So between point C and D, you can see how it's gone over and above where it was before. And that process takes between 5 and 7 days, depending on your age, to take effect. The idea being then you come back the following week at point D and we train you again, weakens you off and you get stronger. So week on week, you're getting stronger every single week. But you can see the important thing is that we rest in between. And you can imagine if we were to train again, let's say we train at about day 2 or 3, we haven't even recovered to where we were when we first came in. So if you train too quickly, you're overtraining and you don't get results. And actually it can have a negative effect on your health. So rest is very, very important, certainly with our way of training, but it is with all sorts of training. Now to explain that a bit more, in fact, I should say if you don't train, you can see by the way between points D and E, that's if you don't train, your actually body loses the muscle mass and it goes back to where it was before because it says, I just don't need it anymore. But we want to keep you strong. Now, if I go to the next slide, with any training that you're doing, you're going to use some of your muscle fibers. But the most effective way is to use all of them and you'll get the best results, which you get with our type of training with Fit 20. To help explain it, I know there's a lot of information on this particular slide. I only want you to look at the top 2 lines at the moment. The top one is the muscle fiber types that are being used. And the one down tells you which ones are engaged with a certain type of activity. So type 1, for instance, is walking. And you can do that a lot. You'll be able to walk quite happily all day, every day. When you go fast walking, type 2A kicks in, then type 2AB when you're running, and finally type 2B with sprinting. And you can imagine, through our lives, most of us don't do much running and certainly no sprinting. Right? So we end up with, and as you know, we either use it or lose it. So we end up losing our capacity to work in that range if we're not careful. And it reduces our energy levels. Right? But with Fit 20, we do use all of them. Now, some people say, but I go for walks and they do the 10,000 steps type of thing. Now, if you look down that page, it shows you about halfway down the recovery, how quickly those muscles recover, those fiber types recover. And you'll see with type 1, you're talking 90 odd seconds and it's recovered. So you don't need much rest, which means you're not working as effectively if you need to. But if you're working all the way through to the type 2B muscle fibers, as you can see there, it says very slow recovery, it takes days. And as you saw from the slide before, if you're using type 2B, you're really talking between 5 and 7 days to recover from that. And this is why when people don't train effectively, then they do need to train a lot more often. But if you get it right, you don't need to train as much and the rest is crucially important. Okay, so hopefully all that's making sense there. Now, to give you an idea of how important it is to rest, and in fact, I'll just come off these slides now. We don't need this now. I'll stop sharing. Hopefully that's all gone away. So it's about training effectively will give you the best results, and then also you need the most time to recover from it. If you don't allow your body to recover, because when you do the training, you actually work in what they call a catabolic state. You're breaking down the body, but that is the stimulus that makes you get stronger. But you only get stronger if you allow the anabolic phase, so the building phase, to get in, right? And that is where the rest is crucially important. Sleep in particular, and Kate is going to talk about sleep in a minute. She's our expert, so she's going to talk in more detail on that. But to give you an idea with sleep, I mean, sleep is crucially important throughout the night, but at certain stages are better. And generally, I have to say, before midnight, that stimulates the release of growth hormones. and testosterone and promotes cell repair. So good quality sleep is important to get the cellular repair and get the best benefit from it. Also, by the way, sleeping cooler is better as well. So having a cool room is very, very good. Now, we also know when you're exercising, or in fact in general life, we can often get stressed. And that produces hormones, and one particular one is cortisol. Now, the good thing with exercise is it does use that up, which is fantastic. Yeah. And if you don't use it up, then actually that can impact you on your sleep as well and make it worse. So exercise can actually support your sleep, which is another good thing. And we should get around, they say, up to 8 hours sleep a night is what you should be aiming for. And studies have shown if you get less than that, if you're hovering around 6 hours of sleep, you actually end up consuming more calories as well. And the studies, from what I understand, you're talking about 300 extra calories a day are consumed if you lose just 2 hours sleep. If you imagine 300 calories a day, and I'm sure a lot of us are sleep deprived, over the course of a year, that's the equivalent of putting on a stone in weight. So it can have a massive effect if you don't get enough rest and enough sleep. Now, people often talk about having sort of a downward spiral. They get themselves, I'm sure we've all been there, where we get stressed out, we comfort eat, and then we struggle to sleep because the stress isn't helping us, and obviously we're eating more calories now. We then get overweight, which creates even more stress because we're now stressed about the fact that we're overweight, and we comfort eat some more. Then we don't exercise because exercise becomes uncomfortable because it's having a compound effect on us. And it just goes down and down. We end up on that negative spiral. Well, the good news is that we can break that with simple changes, and exercise is one of them. So if we think about it, we can turn it on its head. If we exercise, as I've said before, reduces the cortisol, the stress hormone, right? So we become more relaxed, we're more likely to sleep, right? So getting more sleep, we then are less likely to overeat because we're getting that sleep and not eating those extra 300 calories a day. Yeah. By eating less, we're losing weight. We're also exercising, which is improving our muscle tone, which is burning more calories. And you start then having a loop going the opposite direction. So if you can sleep and if you can get the exercise right, it all comes together, and that massively improves our health. So that's all from me. I don't know if you've got any questions or if we should hand over to Kate to talk more about sleep.
Duncan, I just had a question that someone sent through, was just about when you say rest in between your Fit 20 exercise, your resistance training, what do you mean by rest? Do you mean that we sit and do nothing? What do you recommend in terms of kind of other activities that we might be doing during that week?
Yeah, so you can do any other activity. If you're thinking just Fit 20 now, then you can do any other exercises you want to do, as long as you don't do the strength training like we do to the point of muscular failure. So you're accessing that type 2B, because type 2B needs the time to recover. Now, those of you who do Fit 20, and I can see a few of you on the call now, I'm sure you know what it's like. I'm going to use this as a really good way of understanding it. If you are on the leg press machine, when you finish it, so you've done your exercise, you can't stand up straight away, can you? You imagine if you try and stand up straight away, you'd fall straight on your face. There's no way you could do it. But you usually sit there. Whilst we're setting up the next machine, you're sitting there for probably 30 seconds, maybe a minute. Lo and behold, you can now walk again. Why? Because that type 1 muscle fiber, remember we said it recovers in 90 seconds, has had time to recover. Now you can go for your walk. And over time, the other muscle fibers come back in line as well. So yes, you can do other exercises. You can go for a run, because bear in mind that's running around the type 2A muscle fiber type, and that recovers quite quickly. So you can do those as well. But we say you've got to give your type 2B muscle fibers enough time to recover, and that takes between 5 and 7 days. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, that was great. Thank you very much. And when you're using those 2B, you really know about it, don't you? So you're not gonna do that by accident, are you?
No, in fact, I mean, 2B you can access doing different forms of training, but you're really talking very high explosive movements.
Yeah.
So if you're to jump off a wall, for an example, your type 2B muscle fibers will kick in to support you as you're landing on the floor.
Yeah.
Problem with trying to access it in that manner, it's not really a very safe way of doing it unless you know what you're doing, because you're going to cause yourself an injury. Whereas with the Fit 20 training, as those of you know who do it, it's progressively loaded up, and we're not increasing the weight. It just builds up with fatigue with the other muscle fiber types. You end up accessing 2B. which is why it's the best way of training.
Great, thank you. Would anybody else like to ask a question? Anyone in the group? Or if you want, you can pop it into the chat and we can come back to Duncan at the end.
Go for it, Kieran. I saw your hand up.
Yeah, I've got a question just regarding like how you're describing the effectiveness of the training, and I guess why do more people not train like this and train the body as thoroughly as you're describing there? What's your theories on why more people aren't doing this way?
Well, this way of training, as we probably know, certainly in the UK, is new. I know the method of training has been around for many, many years, but it's not well known to train like we do. And so that's one reason why people aren't doing it in that way. But the other thing is to access the type 2B muscle fibers in traditional forms of training, as we said, are very difficult and people don't like to do it. I mean, the example that was given in that slide before is about sprinting. And you know, as we get older, let's face it, we tend not to do that and not want to do that. And accessing it is difficult. And when you do, as we know, it can lead to injuries if you're not used to training in that way. And that's where people get scared and don't do it. The problem is, by not training up to the 2B muscle fiber type, you end up losing that ability. And especially as we get older, that also means that we have reduced energy levels, because the more type 2B access we have to it, the more energy levels you will have. And you just feel better. And actually, believe it or not, it stabilizes the joints. If you can access type 2B and you build that strength up, you will stabilize the joints and feel comfortable doing other exercises. And in fact, one of my members today said they're now thinking about going for runs, which they haven't done in years, because they now feel they're at a point where they can. But you're right, a lot of people don't do it, more because of lack of knowledge and understanding. And also when you start hearing you can train, you know, unfortunately, you've got things like the 10,000 steps that's out there in common knowledge. People think by walking 10,000 steps a day, they're going to get the benefits they want. And nothing could be further from the truth. I mean, the 10,000 steps a day was a pedometer campaign back in the 1950s. It's not based on science at all, but people think that's good for them. But as you can see, you're not working hard enough. You're not accessing those other muscle fibers. So your training isn't anywhere near as good as it should be. Hope that answered the question. Cool.
Hilda, yeah, if you want to unmute yourself.
Yeah, I just want to ask, I mean, I'm a runner. Yep. And I haven't been doing just recently, but I would normally go out and do a hard session once a week. So interval training, a track session, you know, something like that. So I would be expecting to get that explosive, you know, movement that you're talking about, Duncan. And I just wondered, you know, how does that go? Because that would be like basically a second session that I was doing to muscle failure each week.
Well, when you're doing your running, question I should ask me is, are you sprinting or is it running? You know, how far are you running? How long are you running? What time are you spending doing it?
Right, well, it would be, I mean, an example might be, I might do a track session that might be 10 or 15 times 200 meters. So it would be, you know, faster than normal race pace for a 5K or a 10K, for example. So yeah. It would be, I mean, it would be, for me, it would be pretty much sprinting, because I would be going as hard as I could go for those 200 meters, but to sustain it over the number of reps that I was doing and to try and get a similar time, a similar pace for each of them. But it would, you know, it would be, you know, pretty much flat out as fast as you could go for all those reps.
You'd be accessing, doing this 200 meters as many times as you've said, you'll most likely be accessing your type 2A, type 2AB muscle fibers, which recover quicker. You're not likely to be accessing 2B because you wouldn't be able to complete it. In fact, you'd be on the floor. You wouldn't be able to stand if that was the case, if you got to that point. So actually doing that is not going to be an issue, because I wouldn't do the Fit 20 training and that in the same day. I think that would be very tough to do.
No.
But, you know, certainly, you know, a few days later or the following day, you probably find you could do it without too many problems, because you're not going to that 2B muscle fiber type. If you accessed it, you'd know about it because you'd be on a heap in the floor and not be able to stand.
I mean, you're usually pretty fatigued at the end of a session like that. But yeah, I appreciate fully what you're saying. That's kind of put my mind at rest, actually. That's fantastic. Thank you, Duncan. Yeah.
Awesome.
Great. Mark's just put a comment in the chat to say that he runs 35 plus miles a week. Very good, Mark. And you started Fit 20 to increase your core strength, and you're seeing results really quickly. So thank you very much for that comment.
Yeah, the thing you'll find there that's really good, a lot of people I know who train with us have noticed, is when it comes to the hill bits of your run, it gets a lot easier. And that's because you've got access to that 2B muscle fiber type, which you've been not using with your 35 miles a week, because you're not accessing that on a regular basis. So having access to it really helps.
I'm finding it in two ways. Did 10 miles this morning. It's sort of a hilly cross-country route close to where I live. And yeah, definitely noticed that the uphill stuff is a lot easier. The other thing that I've noticed is, and I can only think it's the only thing that's changed is going to Fit 20. I seem to be reducing my pelvic tilt. So I don't know whether the core exercise or something is starting to change things, or whether I'm, I don't know what it is, but my speed is increasing. So for perceived effort, I'm probably 50 seconds, maybe even as much as a minute faster per mile. I'm not a fast runner. I'm certainly not doing 200-meter efforts like Hilda. Stopped that years ago, but I can run comfortably at sort of 7 minutes per mile. And yeah, noticing the difference very quickly.
Lovely. And it does, because with Fit 20, because it's very precise, as you know, with the way we train, it is keep getting your posture as it should be. All the muscles are being trained in the way they should be trained, not how we've allowed things to happen through bad posture and bad technique over the years. And loads of people I know, in fact, one is on the call now, and I don't want to single him out, has said how much his posture's changed through doing Fit 20 training. So yeah.
That's great. Thanks for that, Duncan. That was really good. I'll leave you to introduce Kate.
Yeah, so yes, Kate and I have actually been doing a few webinars. We met up during lockdown and have teamed up together doing a mind and body way of doing things. But Kate is fantastic when it comes to the mind. She's great. She's a sleep expert. As you can see on the poster behind her, it's emotional and physical well-being, and she can help with various things, including hypnotherapy for those that need it. So without further ado, I will hand over to Kate.
Cool, thank you. Remember to unmute. Thank you for saying sleep expert. I wouldn't say expert. We do have a sleep expert in Exeter. However, sleep is a huge part of the work that I do. But thank you very much. Sounds wonderful. So to give you an introduction to my background, interesting that Duncan's talking about medicine and what the doctors used to give you or still do. I was a nurse for 35 years and a very frustrated nurse for lots of different reasons. And all we did was have medication to dish out for most things. Then I transitioned into neuro-linguistic programming, a very long word to say what you think, what you feel, and what you do. That led me to hypnosis, energy healing, all sorts of different modalities. And that is where my passion lies. Just as you can see, Duncan's passionate about his work, that is where my passion lies. Now, a lot of my clients, again, interestingly, talk about type 2 muscles. A lot of mine are type 2 diabetics. And exactly what you were saying about all the different things, how the sleep affects the exercise, affects the diet, you've got to look at things holistically. The other reason why I'm speaking to you about sleep as well is because why am I so particularly personally interested in sleep? Because I am an insomniac. Now, I want to invite you to ask questions. The first question I want to ask you is, why is that an unhelpful thing for me to say? Anybody got any thoughts on that? Why is it unhelpful? Look at what I'm doing. I'm an insomniac. So one of the first things I would say to any of my clients, any of my type 2 diabetics losing weight, take that label off. It's not helpful to have a label. Labels are for tins. I have pinched that from one of my friends, that saying, and it's perfect. And what I've noticed, that even though this has been a 35-year problem, interestingly, ties in with the nursing as well, is what I was thinking about even just doing this webinar and learning more about sleep, the sleep has been better since I realised it's just a label. And if I say now, sometimes I don't sleep as well as I'd like to, other times I sleep better. the whole thing changes. And we were talking at the very beginning of this webinar before you all joined us about, you know, if you're anxious about something the night before because you really want to make sure you sleep well to get up early in the morning, you don't. It's like a self-fulfilling prophecy. So what I'd like to do now, I know Dave's on the call, you've already read the books, you'll know a lot of this already. I've got a very short slide set that's from Matthew Walker's book, Why We Sleep. The rest of the information I've gleaned mainly from reading Michael Mosley and tons of other books. So if time allowing, what I'd like to do after doing the short slide set, and please do ask questions, I also want to talk to you about things like, or mention, should I say, paradoxical insomnia. What does that mean? Polyphasic sleep. Why is that important to know about that? And the Hasta hunters, the hunter-gatherers, they don't even have a word for insomnia. And Night Walks, which is a book written by Charles Dickens. So we'll come back to all of that after. So I'm going to just share my screen with you now. No, I'm not. I'm going to stop that a moment. Get this done. Or just sing amongst yourself for a moment. Got that one up. Now this should work, shouldn't it? Yes, there we go. So there's only about 15 slides to this. Lovely. So why we sleep. So Duncan's already alluded to it. How much sleep do we need? So how much? 8 hours is usually about the general consensus. Now, one thing I will say about all the research study that I've done is that nobody agrees completely. So whereas most of the information out there with like Mosley is very similar to what Walker says, and it's all fascinating, you don't always agree. But one thing everybody does seem to agree on, about 8 hours of sleep. And unfortunately, as we get older, it is quite normal to not need less sleep, but actually we just don't sleep quite so well. More 70 plus, for those reasons. Just a little bit of the science behind it, why we need to sleep. This isn't the actual diagram of the brain. However, what I'd like you to look at is all the little channels, all the little neurons firing. When we sleep at night, it needs to have a rest. As we've talked about, it's all about rest and sleep. And the way it does that is we've got this system called the lymphatic system and the glial cells. Now, if I go to the next slide, now what we did know before is on the left side of the picture, that was the lymphatic system. Most of you are probably aware of that. If you've known anybody that's had cancer treatments and they talk about removing the lymphatic nodes, they fight infection. We've known about all this cleaning system. Now we know it extends right up into the brain. And that cleaning system happens at night when we sleep. So just imagine now the picture on the right. Just imagine that's all the little channels in the brain. And imagine like a little chap with his cleaning equipment at night going through a factory, going through all the tables, down through the corridors. This is what's happening at night. It's like a sewage network system. So as it says on the slide, it removes dangerous metabolic contaminants. So all that thinking, all that busy thinking you've been doing in the day, that needs to get cleaned out, all those hard-working neurons during the day. So it goes into high gear working at night during sleep. And what I think is fascinating is that the glial cells shrink back by about 60% to allow for this cleaning process to happen. Now, I was explaining this to somebody the other day who's not sleeping at the moment, and she's like, I get such terrible headaches. Now, I don't know if this is the answer, but this seems to me to be the case. If I do have a particularly bad night, which is not often, but a really bad night, I have a most awful, strange kind of headache in the morning. I don't know if any of you have experienced, not the normal sort of headache, it's much worse, it lasts all day. I would assume that because this system has not been working in my head overnight on those occasions, this would make sense that that's what it is. So I can't prove it, but it makes sense. Now, we've already talked a little bit, Duncan has, about prognosis. Well, this is another thing with not getting enough sleep. The cardiovascular systems problems, much worse. So your risk of heart disease, much, much higher. Hypertension, that's your blood pressure, much more likely to have raised blood pressure. Weight gain. Interesting, Duncan, that you mentioned, there's one example in Mosley's book. They did research with children and they restricted the sleep. And the next day, I think it was about 30% more sugary, high carbohydrate snacks, were exactly what they were going for. And again, having been an obese child, that's not what we're doing on this webinar, I've got a little photo of me there, but being an obese child, it absolutely makes sense that all these things would then happen. And I do remember being overfed all those carbs. Diabetes, again, way too common nowadays. More and more type 2 diabetics all the time. Alzheimer's and cancer. And when you think about it, when you think about who famously died with Alzheimer's, can you think of two famous politicians, one in this country and one in America, that used to boast about, I only get 3 to 4 hours sleep a night, not a problem.
Thatcher.
Yeah, Thatcher and Reagan, yeah. Two big examples there. So what happens with Alzheimer's, you've got this thing called amyloid protein and tau proteins, they're stress molecules. And the cleaning up process, this is going on in non-REM sleep. So non-REM means when you're not dreaming. Fascinating things happen when you are dreaming. We might get onto those in a moment. But it's this neurological sanitation. So as it says, wakefulness is like low-level damage. Sleep is cleaning it all up. It's the rejuvenating stage. This was another study that was in the book, and tracking the health of coronary arteries, talking about heart disease. And just by restricting that sleep by 5 to 6 hours a night, 200 to 300% more likely to suffer calcification of coronary arteries over the next 5 years. Again, going back to my nursing days, if only we had this sort of information then, if only we were helping people in other ways, rather than the ways we were just giving medication, sticking people on statins, there's so much more, but sleep never really comes into it. And having worked, say, with the GPs and as a patient, it's easier just to give out a prescription for sleeping tablets. Now, we will mention why that they do have their place, but there's so many other things that can be done. And certainly in cardiac rehab. Now this, again, I know Duncan and Dave will know about this one if they read the book. The global experiment. So 1.5 billion people every year have to go through this. We're coming up to it on the 31st of this month. So once a year, we have our sleep reduced by 1 hour less. And then the next day, we have a spate of heart attacks. Now, I used to work in A&E, and it's usually around 3 o'clock in the morning, you get that call, ambulance coming in, somebody's having an MI, that's a myocardial infarction. And what's interesting, again, is when you gain that hour, the heart attack rates plummet the following day. It causes so much stress. So I, for one, would love to see them set the time of our daylight rising, etc., and keep it there. Why it was set was many, many years ago. It was to do with the farming industry. Probably about 100 years ago. There were good reasons back then. They didn't have the hours of daylight. They didn't have the big Massey Ferguson tractors that all singing, dancing, the lights, everything. Everything has changed. We've also now known through research that by simply having shorter school days and making them earlier and keeping with that, you're getting less accidents on the way home from school, less traffic accidents and things like that. And this was another one, going back to what Duncan said about eating, sleep and exercise and putting on weight, just reducing by 4 to 5 hours, to reducing down to that sleep a week experiment. They took actual tissue samples from the people in the experiment, and the cells they found were less receptive to insulin. Now, insulin is a fat-storing hormone. So you eat your carbohydrate food, fat negligible to raise it, protein a little bit, but sugary, and the more refined, the worse it is. You have the sugar, that rises, the insulin has to come out to meet it. It was less receptive to the insulin, so the weight gain is much more likely. And I put here GPs and diabetic treatment. Again, as part of diabetic treatment, it never was part of it, sleep. I've not been practice nursing for sort of 4 or 5 years now. I can't imagine they're really looking at it even now. People like yourselves are on calls like this, doing what you're doing, are so ahead of the game. You really are. Unfortunately, the masses who are going through the NHS system are sadly getting left behind. This is another experiment, fat and muscle loss experiment. So overweight men and women, they took these groups over a 2-week period. In group A, they had about 5.5 hours sleep a night, and group B, 8.5 hours sleep. Now in group A, that had restricted sleep, 70% of pounds lost from muscle mass. Exactly the opposite of what you want to, obviously, with what Duncan's just explained. But B, 50 pounds lost from fat. So that's what we want to see. And just this picture, because it's cute and everybody loves cute pictures. And if I didn't have your attention before, I've got it now. This is an example of a TINA CEO, Mark Bertolini, where allegedly he will give you a $25 bonus up to £500 if you can prove you've had 27 hours of sleep or more in a row. How you quite prove it, I don't know. However, If you're working for somebody, if your boss is sleep aware, I think in like LinkedIn, they have the big offices, or as it was pre-COVID, you'd have sleep pods, things like that. When people really appreciate how important sleep is, then they're going to get more out of their workers as well. Then there's also thinking about work and sleep. I can remember an incident when I was still an A&E nurse many years ago, and we were forced to do internal rotation. And that meant that I was happily-ish on day duty, but forced to do night duty. I'm not good in the night. I'm a lark. I do things in the morning, I work well, slow down in the evening. Don't ask me to do something at 3 o'clock in the morning. So when the police officers, be PC correct, brought in the drunk person he brought in from custody to be seen to, that person actually had to be rescued from me by the other nurse. She knew that I was evil at 3 o'clock in the morning. It was just mad. And this is actually a condition where people that do not do well at night, and you force them to work night duty, they do start to suffer with their health, and their mental health, absolutely, they'll begin to suffer. And as I say, if you happen to be a patient of mine, when I was up at that time of the night, you could possibly suffer as well. So another tip there. So that was, I'm just going to stop the screen share now. Stop share. Where is it gone? That's just a little bit from there. So are there any questions so far? Anything that you'd really like to ask? Then if not, I'll just carry on with some other information for you. No? Oh, yeah, please do unmute. I can't see everybody on the screen.
It's not so much a question, Kate, but I mean, all that you were saying there was absolutely fascinating. And I fairly recently, I don't know if you're aware of someone called Russell Beck. He did, I've seen him speak quite a few times. It's more kind of in a business context, but he did a talk. He's got a white paper on sleep and productivity. And what you were saying about employers and about being aware of people and how important sleep is. And I actually work at hospice care, so of course we've got a lot of clinical staff doing night duty and that kind of thing. And we do put up on our blog, on our website a lot. In fact, today there's something going on social media just about sleep and how important it is. But the fascinating thing that I found from Russell's talk, and again, as you've said today, was about the link with Alzheimer's and dementia, and you know, it really quite shocked me when I found out that. And yeah, I think it's really important that more people are made aware of that. So yeah. I just wanted to say that, not a question, but thank you. Yeah.
No, thank you. It's always interesting. Yeah, I'm always wanted to learn more, always soak up information. And also, which is a good point you mentioned about how we sleep nowadays, since like the Industrial Revolution really. Before that, I mentioned polyphasic sleep. Polyphasic sleep is when we sleep in sections of sleep. So many years ago, it was perfectly normal to have first sleep and second sleep, or maybe even more sleeps. And it could be normal for anybody to be up at any time of the night. And when you think back, always think back with all of this sort of health stuff, go back to primordial times, like Duncan mentioned. How did we used to do it when we were first on the planet? We used to get up when it was light, we used to go to bed when it was dark. We just had to survive, procreate, hunt, things like that. So we used to have these types of sleep. And it also makes sense. If you're in a tribe, and we are tribal beings, you would need the larks to look after things in the morning, keep out on guard. You need the owls to be doing it in the nighttime, and the ones that would get up that polyphasic sleep as well. And I mentioned Night Walks with Charles Dickens. This is a book he wrote because he would purposefully get up at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and he would go and look in the streets of London to just get lots and lots of information that he could then write about in his books, obviously like the prostitution, the destitution, really interesting stuff. He would go back, he would go to sleep again. I mentioned hypnosis, and interesting, the word hypnosis comes from the word sleep, so no wonder I'm interested in this. And Milton Erickson is like the granddaddy of hypnosis, and I believe he as well used to do that. Get up and work, go back and have a second sleep. Now, for most of us, that's not possible. It's not the way the world works these days, and that is partly as well why we have a lot of problems. Which I want to mention is the napping, because nobody's asked it, but usually that's a question. Now, in Matthew Walker's book, he will say, absolutely no way, you do not nap, not ever. Stephanie, the sleep expert in Exeter, I've heard her say the same. Now, I would beg to differ. I say most of Walker's stuff, love it, totally agree. It completely correlates with everything else I've learned, but not napping. Now, for me, as I say, with sleep, I'm very interested in it because of occasionally not sleeping so well. If I'm so tired that I really just need to zonk out and I'm able to, which is not often, I will do that. The best time to nap is before 3 o'clock in the afternoon. It's best not to leave it any later and not to go for more than about half an hour. Otherwise, you get what's called sleep inertia later on. If you've ever done that, you've gone to sleep in the afternoon, 2 hours later, you wake up and think, oh God, I feel so groggy, I feel dreadful. You've overcooked it. Now, for me, if I say have that little short nap at that sort of time of day, I do sleep well at night. And now that is what Mosley would advise. So if napping works for you, then do it. If napping doesn't work for you, don't do it. Another little tip with napping is if you need to be more awake for something later on, you've really got tired, if you've got the time to have a small black coffee and then immediately have that sleep. By the time you come up, the coffee's kicked in, and then that will keep you going for a lot longer. As Duncan said, though, don't have your coffee too late. It's got a half-life of about 5.5 hours. It should be out of your system by then. But for some people, it can be 1.5 hours, and for some people, it can be 9 hours later. And again, microbiome, the food that we eat affects our sleep. It's not going to be the same for any one person. So I can give you a list here if you're interested in really good foods that can potentially help you to sleep. However, because your microbiome, every one of us is different, it will have a different effect. It's the same as the glucose and insulin levels. If I eat 100 grams of rice and Duncan eats 100 grams of rice or ice cream, our levels of sugar will differ on what we've already eaten, what we were doing, when did we exercise, how long ago, and mainly because of what's in our tummies, what's going on in our gut and our gut bacteria.
Sorry,
Now,
Dave, I think has a question, sorry.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Do stop me, because you were about to talk. I could talk about this and all these related things all day long. Yes, please, question.
Dave, sorry, I saw you put your hand up.
Oh, well, I wanted to just legitimise this because I catnap for 10 minutes every day, and I'm going to as soon as we get off here because I won't accept tiredness at all. And I think that's probably because I was, Duncan knows my story, but I was incredibly poorly for a lot of my life. And actually from 18, I've slept every day and I won't accept any tiredness. I've got my own little trick, which is almost dead on Kate, so magic. So yeah, I'll sometimes have a coffee first. And then I set my phone for 15 minutes. It takes me a few minutes to go under. I'm normally out for about 8 minutes and then I come up and I'm off again. So I'm never tired and I won't accept tiredness because, well, I mean, that book legitimizes why you don't want to be tired. Yeah. So, but I get taken the mick out of a lot. And so I just wanted to say it because it's a really cool thing to do. It's wrong to be tired, really wrong. You're stressing out, you're being suboptimal in what you do. I found I was suboptimal with the kids, at weekends, if I didn't have my catnap. And you can get unacceptable in the service you provide to your customers if you've got a business. So sleep.
Thank you for sharing that, Dave. It is lovely because people's own experiences are far more important. We can read all the books. We need to know what people are going through. And I love your attitude that, again, when I'm working with clients from the hypnotic world, attitude is everything. If your belief is, I don't do tiredness and I do like this and this is the way I deal with it, you're much more likely to sleep or do anything else. Whereas if you, again, go back to that label, I'm an insomniac. I mean, even the way, no, I occasionally don't sleep so well and that's fine. And I do this, I do it. It's completely different. So your attitude is so vital. So thank you so much for that, Dave. It's a really, really good example. I do want to, I'm not sure, probably not too much time, I want to mention polyphasic sleep, paradoxical insomnia, because this is something that not many people have heard. Anybody here heard of that? Now, I've actually worked with a client and she came to me for, various reasons, in amongst them was sleep. And hypnosis works very well for sleep. However, taking a history from her, I said, you sound as if you're getting 6 to 8, mostly 8, sometimes 9 hours of sleep a night. And we talked about when the sleep was, and it was mainly in a block. And people can actually believe, think, feel that they're not sleeping enough, but actually when you take a history, they are. So paradoxical insomnia is thinking you've got insomnia when actually you haven't got it at all. However, again, going back to the belief, and like Dave was saying, if you believe it's a problem, guess what? It's going to be a problem. The Bethesda hunting, sorry, any more questions before I carry on? I wanted to mention,
yeah, I've got a quick question.
yeah,
Sorry,
please, Kieran.
maybe you'll get to this. I think it's absolutely fascinating, like the impact that sleep has, and a big part of the problem is we don't know how important it is. So we wear not having sleep as a badge of honor almost, and as Dave has alluded to, and as you've said, it's super important. What would your advice be to someone who understands that sleep is important, probably stresses out quite a lot about not getting enough sleep? Where do they start? What's the kind of first thing that they should look at to kind of try and get on some road to getting more sleep when they already know it's important?
First of all, go and buy Michael Mosley's book. I would say, honestly, without a shadow of a doubt, start with that one. If you want more in-depth stuff, go on to Matthew Walker as well. However, simple steps would be, and a lot of this is from my experience as well, I would say try everything and then gradually let things go and see if you're still sleeping well. So I did go through a period of having about 3 months really good sleep, taking things like Calms, over-the-counter, not medication, over-the-counter tablets can be useful. You definitely want to start with having a cool core. As our body heats up, like if we eat too late at night, that overheats our core. If we're too hot in the core, we don't sleep so well. So having the bath to warm you up, because then you come out, you cool down. Not eating too late. Oh, intermittent fasting, that's another thing that I do, and it is mentioned in the book. So intermittent fasting and time-restricted eating, if you eat within a certain window of time and you make it no later than, say, about 8 o'clock at night, and you don't eat until late the next day, I mean, typically for me it's about 12 o'clock and 6 o'clock, 8, the body has that time to rest and repair. So time-restricted eating will definitely help you to sleep. Lavender oil, now some things will work more for others, some than others. You've also got to bear in mind the placebo effect. Hugely, hugely important. Massive, massive benefits to the placebo effect. Again, if what you're doing, you're believing in, it will work. Research shows us even things like antidepressants. The more, if you believe in it, that's probably as effective as the antidepressants, which a lot of the time don't work. However, back to sleep. So warm bath, time-restricted eating, don't eat too late, keep the room cool. Music, 60 to 90 beats a minute, some jazz music, some classical music, so that can be useful. There are some useful apps like Sleep Stream 2, where you can have binaural beats and other music or relaxation verbally on it. So things that you like to listen to that take you off to sleep. Things like the computers and mobile phones is a myth. This thing about the Blu-rays, apparently it's just too low. What's really going on is if you do something on your computer laptop, other than like reading a story from it, your brain's too busy. So if you're doing last minute emails at night or something like that, your brain's just too busy, it needs to rest. So do things like that. Lavender spray, get some lovely lavender spray, you can spray it on your pillow around the room. Magnesium, it's said that some people are low in magnesium. You can take over-the-counter magnesium tablets, or you can get, which is much nicer, magnesium spray in oil spray. So you just spray it on your skin, rub it in. Again, if you're giving yourself a soothing massage, maybe on your arms, on your tummy, and if you do anything like this, I would suggest that you do it as you go to bed at night. And as we go off to sleep at night, we go into what's called the hypnagogic stage. It's that theta brainwave. You're not quite awake, you're not quite asleep. That's a good time to set an intention, whatever that might be. So for sleep, it could be, I've just sprayed the room, I've had this lovely bath, I've been very calm, I'm just going to simply read a book. And as I'm doing this massage, I'm just feeling very, very comfortable. And even if you just start to massage yourselves, your arms right now and say that, it's got a very calming, soporific effect. So by saying to yourself, I'm feeling very calm, I'm having a really good sleep tonight. And another top tip, don't say, I'm going to have a good night's sleep. Because when we say I'm going to do anything, you're putting it in the future, a bit like Eeyore the donkey and the carrot stuck to his head. So it's always going in the future. Say it as if it's happening right now, in the moment. Facendo means in the process of. So by saying, I'm having a really good sleep tonight, and I look at my body language, I'm nodding, I'm agreeing with myself, having a really good sleep. I've done this and I've done that. And then we go to that 3 o'clock in the morning waking. And this is what I tend to do, because I've got not just a fast talking mouth, but a very busy head as well. 3 o'clock in the morning, you can't sleep. So part of this is what I did, all these different things I've already mentioned to you. Nux vomica is another one recommended by one of my mentors that you can take at night. So 3 o'clock in the morning, I wake up. If you need to go to the loo, please do go to the loo. Don't just lie there thinking, if I go to the loo, it will wake me up, because that will keep you awake. Go to the loo, come back, breathe, go back into that space. However, if there are lots of thoughts running through your mind, there are different ways of dealing with them. Now, what was suggested to me is to say, well, I'm going to allow 3 thoughts to come in. But when those 3 thoughts have come in, I've dealt with them, the rest of you can wait. Now, I'm not going to swear because I know this is being recorded. But for me, that wasn't strong enough. A bit like Dave's, very much don't do being tired. I actually told my thoughts to jog on, but in more expletive terms. And that really worked. And for me, that was the main thing that worked out all the different things. And I still use it now. So what I meant about using things and wearing them off, gradually I ran out of the Calms or Night or whatever I had. So I didn't buy any more. Gradually this ran out. And I went and I carried on sleeping. And the main thing was, when the thoughts went in, I went, no, out, deal with you in the morning. Another way you could do it is to literally have a pen by the bed and a pad and write it down. For me, that was, again, a bit too much waking up and having to do too much. If it suits you, do it. So I think hopefully that, Kieran, that answers your questions. There's probably a few things I've forgotten as well. But do what suits you. Try different things. Be playful. Be creative. Another thing you can do, certainly if you've got children and you're finding them hard to settle at night. So I work with a lot of young adults, children, anxiety, stress, and quite often it's nighttime terrors, not going to bed. Do your routine differently. So set up this nice routine. Don't do whatever you've been doing before. If you go through a phase of not sleeping, if what you do is not working, don't do it anymore. So it could be that even things like brushing your teeth with a different hand. Might sound really daft, it works. And as you're doing it, thinking, sleeping really well tonight, really, had a good night's sleep. Getting into your bed, a different side of the bed if you can. I mean, with this particular child, the bed was up against the wall. I said, well, go up the middle. So you say things to yourself differently. You do things differently. You change it up. Because when we do this, we cause a physiological change. That causes an emotion. It's called a change state. And breathing, thank you. That's what I didn't think to say. I don't pause to breathe quite often enough. When you're going to sleep,
I just add something else.
Yes, please, Dave.
I think, I don't know whether it pertains to you lot, but I think since the 80s, or perhaps before, we all placed work too high in our heads. Yeah. You know, you had the ego trippers in the 80s with the big shoulders and stuff. And I think still we're all defined by our work, which doesn't help us at all. And, you know, we think it's important and it makes us feel important. So we get on our iPhones late, as Kate was saying. And I agree with her about the screens. It's fine to watch Peaky Blinders or Downton Abbey or whatever, because you're having a one-way, you know, you're receiving. You're not out, you're not busy. And I think that's a really key part, that we define ourselves by work, is worrying. And I think if we can sort of, on a Sunday night, my diary gets filled by my family, when I train and when I sleep, and then I put in all my work. So most of you that know me know I'll stop by 3:30. That's my choice. And then I train for an hour. And then I might pop on between 7 or 8, you know, and do emails and look after my clients. But I think that whole mentality of aren't we important actually keeps us awake. So get a grip and realize, you know, that you're the most important, and you'll only look after your customers well if you're well. And I'm in healthcare, so I've got to be on the ball. I can't afford to make a balls up. So yeah, that's my little bit.
Thank you, Dave. That's so important. I was writing that in an email to a client follow-up this morning, exactly that. Put your self-care first, because when you're in the right place, physically and mentally, you can be there for others. You really do need to be in that space, and you're right, because the people that are busy going, I've got to do this, I've got that for everybody else, are going to possibly burn out. They are going to be the ones maybe putting on weight, getting diabetes. They're going to create other things. They're going to manifest ill health, and that will get them in the end. It'll get them more quickly than if they took the time out to do exactly what you're saying, Dave. Take that time out, stop, pause. So is there time for me just to quickly do the breathing exercise, or would you like me to wrap it up? Because I see it's 1 minute past 1.
I think if people are happy to stay on the call, if everyone's got a few minutes.
I have to whiz off.
Okay.
Sadly, I have to Zoom. Sorry.
Well, thank you so much for joining us, Dave. And
thank you, guys. Thank you, Kate, and thank you, Duncan.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Nice to see you.
And nice to meet you all.
Cheers.
I appreciate if anybody needs to pop, because I know what it's like. Right. Especially if you are with a busy mind, or you're going to sleep at night, or you're just in a tiz about anything, and just look at the way I'm behaving now, even though I'm just pretending I'm explaining it to you. So I'd like you to sort of just get a little bit busy in your heads for a moment, just think about something. Oh God, is she going to stop talking in a minute? Whatever it might be. Right, now at that point, breathe with me. Now stop. From the tummy, not up here, big breath in for the count of 7, okay? And in. And hold for 4. And out for 11. Push it out. Push it all the way out. And in. And hold. And push it out. Right from the belly now. Big suck in. And push it all the way out. And tell me if any of you are not feeling slightly fuzzy-headed, just ever so slightly now. You are, aren't you? Yeah. What's happened? When you breathe in, you secrete adrenaline. When you breathe out, you secrete noradrenaline. Noradrenaline is your calming, rest and digest hormone. So if you want more of that, more rest, breathe out more slowly. Breathe out for longer than you breathe in, and push it out. And let the body drop, and let the shoulders drop, and let your mind drop into that space that's lovely and calm. And